I really think it's special that this town has taken on this multi-generational project of preserving a presidential legacy. And I'm grateful to be a part of that, and I'm excited to keep learning from this town and to keep learning how we can better serve Columbia. My name's Candace Candido, and I'm the curator and currently interim executive director at the President James K. Polk Home and Museum. So my primary job is anything related to the collection. So that's everything from collections management and just taking care of the objects that we have here at the museum to using those objects to tell stories. So I also oversee education and exhibition. So we have a temporary exhibit space. We have maybe 3 or 4 exhibits a year, so I curate those, as well as taking care of the permanent exhibits and permanent interpretation that we do at the collection here.
My name is Thomas Samuel. I am the Education and Program Coordinator at the President James K. Polk Home and Museum. So I'm in charge of field trips, camps, all of our education programming. I'm kind of the first point of contact for teachers, as well as some of our other programming like outreach, distance learning, we have nursing home programs, things like that. So kind of a lot of irons in the fire, just general programming and education. James K. Polk is a really interesting president. So for me as an educator, I'm a licensed history teacher, so I look at the standards. So if you look at a teacher standards, Polk's in the 4th grade, 5th grade, 8th grade standards, shows up in AP classes. And the reason he's so important is this concept of manifest destiny, if you've heard that. Western expansion and this idea in the 19th century that America was destined almost divinely to spread across the continent. James K. Polk did more to kind of realize that idea than any other president. But what's interesting about that is how much is wrapped up in that idea. Like, this is not necessarily all good. There's a lot of problems that come. And James K. Polk is able, is a great entry point for educators, for people who are interested in American history to kind of engage with difficult topics in American history, the history of slavery, of racism, of Native peoples, all of these things that we think about and we learn about in history class. James K. Polk is front and center in that history, and helps kind of triggers the chain of events that have gotten us here to where we are modern day. So pretty big deal guy, I guess.
Columbia is really as much of a hometown as James K. Polk has. The reason the museum is here is that we're in the only surviving home of James K. Polk. So he lived in several different towns. He was born in North Carolina. As a child, his family moved to roughly the Spring Hill area in Tennessee. And then while he was a student at the University of North Carolina, his father had this home built here, which is now the only one of those properties that's still standing. So Polk, James K. Polk lived in this home for about 6 years as a young adult while he was kind of launching his political career, his law career. He had big ambitions for his life after college, I think, but he moved back in with mom and dad, lived in this home until he got married. So then he and Sarah lived pretty much across the street here in Columbia, but that home's no longer standing. He lived, of course, in the White House, which is still standing. And then he had a really brief retirement at his home in Nashville, Polk Place, which was torn down shortly after his wife, Sarah, passed away. So Columbia is where Polk kind of got his start. It's where he formed his ideas about the West. It's where he launched his ambitious career. And it was his home with his wife, even as he started his career in politics. This was sort of his home base. Columbia was the frontier when Polk was living here, but it was a really growing town as well. It wasn't really the middle of nowhere. He was in a space that had ambitions like his own, so the town was really growing. There was a town square with a courthouse, not the same building, but different courthouse, and businesses like it is today. So this was a space that a lot of new Tennesseans were using to kind of carve out pretty ambitious lives for themselves, and that was right where James K. Polk wanted to be, kind of on the cutting edge of American identity and American future. So Columbia, I think, was a big part of making James K. Polk what he became.
I mean, the home that I'm sitting in, we're surrounded by these objects, and so one of our missions is to preserve these things and to continue to share them. So in some ways, we have to maintain the course that was set for us in 1929 whenever they opened this for tours. On the other hand, it's also our job to expand the mission and to dig into these stories and find the ways in which we can reach the broader community, and communities that may have not been reached out to before. And so through Candace as a curator, she spearheaded this kitchen garden project. So we're bringing in foodways, ways to talk about enslaved people who were on the property and the way they interacted with James K. Polk and his family. We've got these programs and exhibits that continue to kind of expand what we do and what we can talk about. And so while maintaining what we are at a core as the James K. Polk home, that museum side and that programming side will continue to grow and hopefully become more and more nationally significant to where we are entering in dialogues with, the best museums in the country.
One of the first things that I did when I took this job was I started to get to know the people that have made up the James K. Polk Memorial Association, the nonprofit that runs this museum. And I learned really quickly that people have been involved with this site for a long time, and it's an important part of not just their own lives, but their families. So I think that's really special. There's not a lot of museums that can say that their community has that kind of ownership. So I've really enjoyed just getting to hear people's memories of the site and how, their mother, their grandmother was involved with the Polk Association and how it means so much to them. And I love that that this is a presidential site. It's a nationally significant historic site, but it's this town, this relatively small town in Tennessee that has preserved it and operated this and shared it with the nation for going on a century now. So a lot of our visitors are surprised to hear that. When they come, they assume that we're run by the federal government, which we're not. We are run by a nonprofit that is made up of dedicated members of this community that have given of themselves, their time, their resources, their passions over 3 or 4 generations at this point. And that's I think that's really unique. It makes this site special, and it's really kind of puts a little bit of pressure on me in some ways in this role, that I always try to remember how much this site means to this town. It's not just preserving this for the nation, but we have a special place in Columbia's heart as well. And one of the things we're really committed to going forward is making sure that we are giving back to this town as much as we take in. We want to be a resource to people beyond just coming here in 4th grade and seeing the house once. We want people to see this as a place that has continued meaning for them, that is a resource for them. I think community is a core thing that we're focusing on going forward. We do want to be relevant and meaningful to our town. We want to be a resource to people who want to just enjoy themselves, people who want to connect with the past, people who want to think deeply about big questions of American identity and how our nation got to where it is, because I think that Polk has a lot to say to that. And despite the fact that he's not one of the most remembered presidents, he's an extremely significant president. And every day we see more and more relevance to the types of questions and issues that were taking place during Polk's presidency. We have a lot of programs that we'd like to continue to expand and grow. Polk's America is one of those. So
this is our lecture series that's been going on since 1998. But in the past couple years, we've tried to kind of transform it into this really engaging, like intellectual activity for our small town. And what I've done in my capacity is to convert it into a podcast. And it's not just a simple, here's the lecture, post it. I have a background in audio engineering, so I edit them, I add music, I do some narration, I bring in other voices to kind of create almost a 30-minute radio show, NPR type vibe.
It's an opportunity for us to bring in really respected scholars and museum professionals from around the country to our small town here in Tennessee. We meet at the Murray County Public Library once a month during normal non-pandemic times, and are able to engage with some of the most cutting-edge, significant scholarship that's coming out of universities and museums across the nation. And we have those conversations right here in our small town with our own community. We make that into a podcast, which is really special. So I think that's something we'd like to continue to see grow. But one of our biggest transitions right now is that our director, John Holtzapfel, of 36 years, just retired. So John, over the course of his leadership here, really took this site from a relatively small house museum to a presidential museum with multiple buildings on our campus, and some really established long-running programs. And he really moved this organization in the direction of a truly professional museum, a top-notch museum. So I think that's a question that we have to kind of think about now, is in that moment of transition. So John's tenure got us to this point. Where do we want to go going forward? And I think certainly growing in our outreach and our relevancy is going to be the core to how we answer that question.
As a representative of the James K. Polk Home, I would just invite people to come and talk to us, to come take a tour. A lot of people, their one point of contact with the James K. Polk Home is that fourth grade field trip where they come through, they see the house, they get the story, and then it's, in one ear, out the other. For some people, it's a more lasting impact. Especially now, our goal is to make it a place you want to return to. So if I could talk to the community, it'd be like, one, come see what we're doing, come to a program, come to Polk's America, come see our new exhibits as they open. We have one open, or it's about to close now, but come to our exhibits and just talk to us. We want to hear from our community. We want to be a destination for our community, not just as a historic home, but as a a touchstone, as a cornerstone of the community. We've been here a long time, and there's a lot of stories, a lot of history, and it's something that I think the community, we want to hear from you. We want to see you.